We're going to automate the selection of various type attributes inside of our Total Training Trifold brochure template here by creating paragraph and character styles for our InDesign template. Now, if you've been following along sequentially through the lessons in this course, you may recall in Chapter 1 when we added the character styles and paragraph styles buttons to our side dock as we created our TT class workspace. Now you can tell the difference between general paragraph attributes and paragraph style attributes because anytime you're dealing with a styles panel, you have these two little boxes that signify fill and stroke sitting down here to the lower left hand corner of the button. I'm going to click on the paragraph styles button, and you'll notice when I do so that the pages panel disappears on our screen. The reason for that is one of the few limitations we have as we work with the side dock is that only one panel can be open at the time. So if I want to see both the pages panel and the paragraph styles panel, what I need to do is I need to separate the two of them. I'm going to go to these two dotted lines at the very top of the character and paragraph panel group here in our side dock. I'm going to hold the mouse button down, and as I do so, I'm going to drag that down and I'm going to set it right over here to the far side of my document window. Now, as I've got those separated, it allows me to see both the pages panel and the paragraph style panel at the same time. Now, I haven't damaged this irreparably. If I want to go back to my original baseline, all I have to do is go to my workspace button right here, or go to the window pull-down menu, and select the Reset TT Class menu command. And when I do that, what it'll do is it'll go right back to the original baseline that we've got to work with. And as we do that, we're right where we originally started. But of course, I've done this because I want to see both of those panels. So I'm going to separate them once again. I'm going to go to those two double dots. I'm going to pull it down just like so. And that'll allow me to open the Pages panel as well as the Paragraph Styles panel at the same time. Now, you'll notice as I do that it creates one style that's known as Basic Paragraph, even though we haven't asked it to do that. This contains the basic rules for whatever font is going to appear when we're working with Adobe InDesign and creating a new document. Even if we haven't chosen any unique style attributes, this is what will be used by default. Now I can create a new paragraph style by going to this flyaway menu here and selecting the menu command at the very top in the flyaway menu, but I don't want to do that. Rather, I'm going to go to this button down to the lower right hand corner of the panel, the one with the little page in the turned up corner, and click on it to create a brand new style. And when I do that, it creates one that's rather cryptically named Paragraph Style 1. I'm going to double click on that, and when I do, it opens up the Paragraph Style Options dialog box. Here's where we can set the rules that we want to maintain when we create our new paragraph style. And the first one I'm going to create is I'm going to change the name from this rather cryptic Paragraph Style 1 to Body Copy, which is in fact going to be the style that we're going to be working with. Now you'll see that it's based on no paragraph style. That just means we haven't created a brand new one. That this is going to be standing alone. We're going to be working with this from scratch. The next style is going to be the same style, which means if we're typing directly into Adobe InDesign, when I hit the return key and do the next paragraph, it also will be Body Copy paragraph style attributes and contain all of those. We also have the option to load a keyboard shortcut in here. So if you're very experienced working with this, you can call out the paragraph styles you're working with on the fly. We're not going to do that for this lesson in our InDesign course. If you look over to the left, you'll see we have a number of different layouts that are available to us as we're working and establishing our paragraph styles. Let's go to the second one here, Basic Character Formats, and as we select that, it'll allow us to see what the default font is that we'd be working with. In this case, it shows us Minion Pro. The font style is regular, 12 points on 14.4 point leading or auto leading. Kerning, tracking, case, and position are normal defaults. We're going to change these rules here to make them unique for what we're working with in our Total Training Trifold Brochure template. So I'm going to change the font here from Minion Pro down to Times. If you don't have Times on your machine, you can select Times New Roman. I'm going to leave the font style regular. In this case, it shows the 4 font weights that we have available, including italic, bold, and bold italic. We're not going to select any of those here, and we'll set those up as character styles a little bit later in this unit of our InDesign CS6 course. We'll go with the regular default. We're going to take the type size and we're going to make it 13 points, and we're going to change the leading to 15 points. Now, we have kerning options. We're going to leave those as they're set. We have tracking options, which deal with how much space we artificially expand or contract to put in between individual characters. We can set the case, in this case normal, which is what we're going to leave, but we have options to set all caps, small caps or initial caps, or if we're working with an open type font, we have additional options for what we can set as all small caps with that font. We also have the ability to change the position from normal to superscript, like 7 squared, that little number that would sit above the 7, or subscript, so it would be H2O, like the little 2 that we'd put after the H for hydrogen for water. We're not going to do either of those options. Again, we'll leave it back at normal. We have the ability to set that type to be underlined, a strike through, ligatures, which put consonant pairs together to set the type just a little more stylishly. We'll leave that on. And then no break, which doesn't allow us to set soft returns inside that document. It'll try to put all that type onto a single line inside of our text frame, unless we chose to manually break that ourselves. So, if you've got your basic character format set to Times, or Times New Roman if you don't have Times, regular weight, 13-point type on 15-point leading, and we've left all the default settings, you're on the right track. Let's go to the next layout, and we're going to go to Advanced Character Formats. What this does is this allows us to set a horizontal scale number, a vertical scale number, so we can compress or expand the type from side to side or high and low. We're actually going to reduce the width of this type ever so slightly by going down from 100% to 95%. That slightly compresses the width of our type characters and allows us to fit a few more characters on the line. We can change the baseline shift to move it above or below where that type would normally be set for each line, and we can skew or slant that type to, say, for example, create artificial slanted type for a font that we don't have an italic weight for. We're not going to change any of that here. You'll notice at the bottom of this layout that we have a language option, and in this case it shows my default as English USA, as I'm recording this with the American version of the software. If I click on these 2 arrows to the right, it'll show all of the various options that we have available inside of our options box. Now, if I chose, for example, to make this French, it wouldn't automatically translate any type that I put into InDesign into a brand new language. What this does is this sets the rules for hyphenation and justification for type that we create within InDesign, determining where soft returns would come to break one line down to the next, or if it can't fit the entire word on line, to set the rules for how to break up that word with hyphens between syllables as that soft return goes from one line of type to the next line of type that we set within our text frame. So if you have a setting of horizontal scale of 95% and no other changes, everything's all set. You're doing good. Let's go to indents and spacing next. What we're going to do in this case is talk about the options that we have available. Now I can set this type to align to the left, which means it would have a ragged margin over to the right. I could center it or set it to align right, which would put the ragged margin to the left, I have options for justifying it. So I'd have even flush margins to the left and right side of that type. We're not going to change anything here. We'll leave it left for the default. I have a couple of checkboxes immediately below. One to balance ragged lines. So, for example, if I had a very short line with a soft return to go to a longer line that had a soft return to go to a much smaller line, in those three lines, InDesign would automatically try to balance that out so that would be more even and there wouldn't be such big gaps between the smaller lines and the larger ones. We're not going to select that, but we are going to choose Ignore Optical Margin. And what that translates into is what's known as hanging punctuation. So for example, if you have quotation marks at the very start of a line of type, or you have punctuation like question marks or commas or periods at the end of that line, what this will do is it will allow InDesign to set what's known as hanging punctuation. That punctuation will actually push a little bit outside of the edges of the text frame, actually allowing you, as you're working with that, to line up the type more evenly within the text frame itself. Now beneath that, we have an option for setting a left side indent, a right side indent, or a first line or a paragraph indent. So we could make that a positive number, for example, to set a paragraph indent. Or if we're setting bulleted or numbered lists, we could actually turn that into a negative indent that would allow that to hang the number or bullet that we set outside of our left side margin. We also have the ability to set space before and after, and to set grid alignment options if we've set up what's known as a type grid for working with the fonts inside of our InDesign document. So if you have the settings for the alignment to left, the Ignore Optical Margin checkbox selected, and you have not changed any of the other options that are available here, again, you're on the right track. We're ready to continue to the next layout, which is the tabs layout. Now, if you've worked with word processing programs like Microsoft Word or WordPerfect, and you've used tabs to align from a tab ruler working with your word processing program, this should look very familiar to you. It works just like it would in a word processing program. So for example, we have these two right-angled triangles, the lower one for my left side margin, the top one for my first line margin. Let's move both of those in by putting our cursor right on that lower triangle and moving it into a half of an inch. Then go to the top triangle and move it back to the left so we have a negative indent of a half an inch. And then let's go to this triangle and we'll move it in a half an inch as well. Now, what I've done is I've set up a hanging indent or negative indent that matches up for a half-inch left side margin and a half-inch right side margin set inside of my column guides. If I go back to indents and spacing, you'll actually see that these numbers are also listed, so I can set them with precise numerical control the same way that I was dragging them back and forth in that tabs layout. Now I'm going to change these back to 0, first by making a mistake here and going to this left indent. I'm going to make that 0. And when I hit the tab key, what will happen is that InDesign will complain and say that there's an invalid indent value. Indents cannot extend outside the text frame. What that means is when you set a negative indent like we have right here for that first line indent, you have to change that first. So I'm going to make it 0. And when I do that, now I'll be able to make that left side margin 0. And when I hit the tab key, InDesign won't squawk at me, and I can make the right indent 0 once again. When I go back to the tabs layout, I'll see everything set back at the default. Now I can also lay tabs inside this ruler area. I've got a left justified tab, which means wherever the tab position is, the text is going to go off to the right. I have a center justified tab, which would take whatever text I set at a tab position and space it evenly left and right to whatever that tab position would be. I have a right justified tab, which means the text would go off to the left. The little hint I've got is that's the way that tail looks. For the right justified tab, it points to the left, just as for the left justified tab, that tail points to the right. I also have the ability to set decimal or other specified character tabs, which allows me to, for example, line up numbers if I'm building a table for tabulations or to show a balance sheet of some sort, or to line up dissimilar decimal figures evenly when I'm working with tables in my InDesign document. Now, placing a tab is just as easy as it would be in a word processing program like Microsoft Word. All I have to do is go to this white space above the ruler, and when I click the mouse button, what it's going to do is it's going to place a tab at that position. In this case, because my left justified tab was highlighted, that's what it puts on the ruler. Now I can drag these and move them to where I want them to be. I can also set that with precise numerical controls. So in this case, what I can do is I can highlight that, backspace, and hit the tab key, and when I do that, it will move that precisely to a ½ inch. So I can set it with precise numerical control. I can set a leader for that if I want to. So for example, if I put a dot leader there, it will set dots ahead of my tab position. If I wanted dashes instead, I could place that in there as well, or really any character that I want to put in that position. For whatever rule, I can repeat those tabs just clicking on this button right here. So if I do that, it'll set a tab at every ½ inch. If I want to get rid of tabs, it's as easy as just selecting them and dragging them off of that space above the ruler, just like so. Or in this case, since we don't really want any tabs, I can clear them all and go back to our default settings.